The alarm on my wrist pulsed red before I even reached the chamber doors, and my hearts began racing, because red meant the peace talks were already breaking apart. I am Cavan, a liaison officer, and I had spent 3 years trying to keep 6 species from tearing each other apart over a war that had cost too much already. Today was supposed to be the day it finally ended. Instead, I was sprinting down a corridor toward a room full of armed delegates who did not trust each other, and humanity had just walked in carrying a basket. I want to explain that clearly. A basket. Woven, simple, the kind you might carry vegetables in. And inside it were 4 small animals that were about to change everything I thought I understood about power. The delegation from Kralik stood on one side of the chamber, tall and armored, their plated bodies still carrying the scars of a war that had only just gone quiet. On the other side sat the human envoy, a calm woman named Ellen, who did not look nervous at all, even though half the room wanted a reason to walk out and start fighting again. I had seen humans bring terrifying things to negotiations before, giant armored creatures. Loyal beasts trained for combat, so powerful that other species had once demanded they be banned entirely. Everyone expected something like that today. Instead, Ellen placed the basket on the table, and out stepped 4 small creatures with wide eyes and calm, unreadable faces. She called them cats. The room went silent, and then the Kralik commander, a war veteran named Threx, who had led assaults that ended entire settlements, let out a short clicking sound, which is how his people express amusement. It was a mistake. One of the cats, a small orange one, turned its head slowly and looked directly at him. It did not move. It did not make a sound at first. It simply watched him, with an expression that made the air in the room feel heavier. Then it made a low sound, almost like a growl but stranger, deeper, older than anything I had heard from an earth creature before. Threx's armored plates flared open on instinct, a reflex his people only use when they sense real danger. And then, to the shock of everyone present, he sat back down without finishing his sentence. He apologized. A war commander, apologizing to an animal smaller than his own forearm. I turned to the human beside me, a scientist named Daniel, who had accompanied the delegation. I asked him what was happening, because nothing about this made sense. He smiled, almost proud, and told me that cats do not fight the way our militaries fight. They do not charge. They do not need weapons. They test you with patience, with silence, with a stare that never wavers, and if you flinch, they already know everything about you that they need to know. I did not understand it then. I understood it very soon after. Throughout the next hour, I watched something that felt more like a slow unraveling of pride than a diplomatic meeting. A delegate from the Paxi people, whose species communicates partly through subtle chemical signals, reached out to touch one of the cats, perhaps hoping to calm the mood in the room. The cat allowed it, briefly, long enough for the Pataxi delegate to visibly relax. Then, without warning, it pulled back and gave a small, sharp nip. Not enough to cause harm, but enough to make a point. The Pataxi delegate did not protest. He looked almost honored, as if he had been given some kind of test and had passed. I began writing notes furiously, trying to keep up. Every species in that chamber had brought its own display of strength. The Kralik brought their scars and their history. The Pataxi brought their calm chemical presence. Even the quiet, insect-like Sarai delegation had arrived with armored guards standing at attention behind them. But none of that seemed to matter anymore. All eyes, all attention, kept drifting back to 4 small animals, lounging across the negotiation table, as if the entire room belonged to them. At one point, the Kralik war liaison, a stern officer named Voss who had been stalling on agreeing to any resource compensation, found himself locked in a staring match with the same orange cat that had confronted Threx earlier. Voss tried to look away. He could not. 5 seconds passed, then 6. And something about the calm, unblinking patience of that small creature seemed to strip away every excuse he had prepared. He agreed to the compensation terms on the spot, terms his own government had not yet approved. Later, when I asked him why, he simply said that the cat already knew he was lying, and there was no point continuing to pretend otherwise. I leaned toward Daniel again and asked him plainly why humans would bring creatures like this to a peace summit instead of their trained combat animals, the massive bears and loyal war dogs that had become legendary during the recent conflict. He explained that those animals were built for battle, loyal, powerful, obedient. But cats were something else entirely. They were not soldiers. They were judges. Nothing in that room could hide from them, because a cat does not care about rank or history or reputation. It only cares about truth, expressed through stillness and patience. As the hours passed, the mood in the chamber shifted in a way none of us expected. Species that had been circling each other with suspicion for years began speaking more honestly, almost as if they were afraid of being caught in a lie by something with such calm, judging eyes. The tension that had haunted the war did not vanish, but it softened, cooling into something workable, something real. Near the end of the session, one of the cats, a smaller gray one, leaped onto the negotiation table and walked calmly across sensitive data screens, knocking a small stack of documents onto the floor. For a moment I feared chaos, an incident that could unravel the fragile trust building in the room. Instead, several delegates laughed. Actual laughter. The first sound of real relief I had heard in that chamber in 3 years. Even Threx, the war commander, allowed himself a low, rough chuckle as he bent down to gather the fallen papers. I realized then that something remarkable was happening. This was not about strength or fear. It was about honesty forced through calm confidence, something every species in that room respected on a level deeper than language. By evening, the treaty was signed. Every side agreed to terms faster than any negotiation in recent memory, faster than anyone believed possible after such a long and painful conflict. As delegates filed out of the chamber, shaking hands, exchanging quiet words of relief, I stayed behind with Daniel and Ellen, staring at the 4 small creatures now curled together near a warm patch of light from the chamber windows. I asked Daniel how humans had discovered this, how they had learned that such small animals could accomplish what armies and diplomats could not. He told me that on Earth, these creatures had lived alongside humans for thousands of years, never fully tamed, never truly obedient, respected even by animals far larger and more dangerous than themselves. He said that even ancient predators avoided confrontation with them, not because of size or strength, but because conflict with them was never worth the trouble. Whilst humans had learned patience and honesty from creatures who demanded both, without ever raising their voice. Ellen added something I have never forgotten. She said that humanity had many creatures capable of causing harm, animals bred for protection and combat, but peace required something different. Peace required a mirror, something that could sit quietly and reflect back the truth of every person in the room, until pretending became impossible. I looked at the orange cat, now stretching lazily across the table, where, only hours earlier, it had silenced a war commander with nothing but a look. It seemed entirely unaware of what it had done, or perhaps it understood perfectly and simply did not care, which somehow made the moment even more powerful. That night, I filed my report to the council, describing everything I had witnessed. I wrote that humanity's true strength was never only in their massive, loyal creatures, built for protection and battle. It was in their patience, their honesty, and strangely, in 4 small animals who asked for nothing, feared nothing, and yet earned the quiet respect of every species present. As I finished writing, I glanced toward the corner of the room where the cats now rested peacefully, guarded not by soldiers, but by their own quiet confidence. Outside, the station lights dimmed into evening, and for the first time since the war began, the galaxy felt a little closer to real peace. I still do not fully understand how it happened. Perhaps some truths are simply too honest to argue with, and some kinds of courage need no weapons at all.